Cleopatra was not just a beauty. She was a politician who played Rome at its own game, and almost won. Most people meet her through romance stories, but Cleopatra lived in a world where romance was often strategy. She was born into the Ptolemaic dynasty, a Greek royal family ruling Egypt after Alexander the Great's empire fractured. By Cleopatra's time, Egypt was rich but vulnerable, and Rome was the rising giant that could decide who lived and who vanished. Cleopatra grew up surrounded by palace danger, because in her family power often changed hands through betrayal. She learned early that survival required intelligence, timing, and control of perception. Unlike many rulers around her, Cleopatra learned languages and understood cultures, because influence travels through words. When her father died, Cleopatra became co-ruler with her young brother Ptolemy, the 13th. But real power inside the palace was a knife fight. Court advisors pushed her aside, and she was forced out of Alexandria, the city that was both her throne and her trap. At that moment, Cleopatra could have become a footnote, another defeated queen, erased by her own family. Instead, she made the move that defined her legend. She returned to Alexandria to face the greatest power in the Mediterranean, and she came with a plan. That power was Julius Caesar, who arrived in Egypt, chasing his rival Pompey during Rome's civil war. Pompey was murdered by Egyptians trying to please Caesar, but it backfired, because Caesar hated the insult and saw Egypt's politics as unstable. Cleopatra understood that Caesar was not only a general, but also a judge of kings. If she could win Caesar, she could win Egypt, so she arranged a meeting that was theater and diplomacy at the same time. She appeared before Caesar in a way meant to shock the room and control the story, and suddenly the exiled queen was the center of attention. Caesar backed Cleopatra, and Egypt fell into conflict, because palace factions fought to keep her from the throne. Through war and maneuvering, Cleopatra regained power, and her brother Ptolemy, the 13th, died in the chaos. Now Cleopatra ruled with another younger brother, Ptolemy the 14th. But everyone knew who truly held the crown. Her alliance with Caesar was more than romance, because it tied Egypt. Esophato Rome, strongest man. Cleopatra later traveled to Rome, and her presence there made Roman elites uneasy. Romans feared kings, and they feared foreign influence, and Cleopatra looked like both. When Caesar was assassinated in 44 BCE, Cleopatra's position became dangerous overnight. The man who protected her was gone, and Rome became a battlefield of ambition. Cleopatra returned to Egypt and began preparing for the next storm, because in her world you either chose a side or you were chosen as a victim. That storm produced Mark Antony and Octavian, Caesar's heirs in different forms. Antony was a warrior and a showman, while Octavian was colder, quieter, and built for endurance. When Antony summoned Cleopatra to meet him, he expected a client queen. Cleopatra arrived like a ruler, not a guest. She used spectacle to set the tone, because in ancient politics, the first impression could become policy. Antony needed money and supplies for Rome's wars, and Cleopatra needed security for Egypt and her dynasty. Their alliance became personal, but it was always political, because love did not cancel strategy. Cleopatra gave Antony resources, and Antony gave Cleopatra legitimacy and territory. Together, they looked powerful enough to reshape the Eastern Mediterranean, but Octavian watched them like a predator. Octavian understood that Rome could be controlled through stories, so he built a story where Antony was no longer a Roman leader, but a man corrupted by the East. In that story, Cleopatra became the true enemy, a foreign queen seducing Rome away from itself. It was propaganda, but propaganda is a weapon that can kill without drawing blood. Antony and Cleopatra also made choices that looked like monarchy, and that terrified Romans who hated kings. In their mythology, they presented themselves with royal symbolism, held grand ceremonies, and spoke like founders of a new order. To Cleopatra, it was survival and ambition. To Octavian, it was the perfect excuse to declare a final war. Rome did not officially declare war on Antony at first. It declared war on Cleopatra, because it was easier to sell the conflict as defense against a foreign threat. The world moved toward Actium, the battle that would decide everything. In 31 BCE, fleets met near the Greek coast, and the war turned into a test of nerve and coordination. Octavian's forces, commanded by Agrippa, fought with discipline and control of space. Antony and Cleopatra's fleet struggled under pressure, and the sea became a cage. Then came the moment historians argue about. Cleopatra's ships moved, and Antony followed. Some see it as betrayal, others see it as a planned retreat, but in more perception becomes reality. Octavian claimed it was proof that Antony had chosen Cleopatra over Rome. After Actium, their power collapsed like a building losing its foundation. They fled to Egypt, hoping for a miracle that never arrived. Octavian advanced, and allies switched sides, because fear pulls people toward the winner. In Alexandria, Antony received false news that Cleopatra was dead, and he chose suicide in despair. Cleopatra was not dead, and the tragedy became unbearable. She tried to negotiate with Octavian, because her mind never stopped calculating. But Octavian wanted a trophy, not a partner. He planned to take Cleopatra to Rome and display her in a triumph, a living symbol of conquest. Cleopatra understood what that meant. She would become a humiliation on the streets of the city that feared her. So Cleopatra made her final choice, a choice that still controls her legend. She died in 30 BCE, ending the Ptolemaic dynasty and ending Egypt's independence. Egypt became a Roman possession, a source of grain and wealth that strengthened Octavian's power. Octavian then became Augustus, and the Roman Empire was born. This is the deeper irony of Cleopatra's life. She fought to preserve Egypt through alliances with Rome's strongest men, but those alliances helped create the very empire that swallowed her kingdom. So why is Cleopatra misunderstood? Because her story was written by her enemies, and winners write history with sharp pens. Roman writers shaped her into a temptress, because it was easier than admitting Rome was shaken by a brilliant foreign ruler. They framed her as emotion, not strategy. But Cleopatra was strategy. She used language, wealth, symbolism, and timing like weapons. She played a game where the stakes were dynasties, and she survived longer than most could. Cleopatra was not simply a romance. She was a last stand against a rising empire, led by a woman who understood power better than most men around her. And if you want more stories like this, like the video and subscribe to History Refuge.